Okay, so now I'm going to ask you a trick question.
Okay.
Which is totally fair in academic circles. This is what we do all the time. We just ask trick questions. And if you get it wrong, you get denied tenure. So, okay, I will accept provisionally that it's not, although I'm not 100% convinced, by the way, but for now, I will say, let's say it's not about economics, okay? Could it be, and this is what I think, could it be, listen carefully, Eric.
Okay.
Trick question. Could it still be about class? In other words, so the trick part of the question, just so you know, is that class is defined both culturally and economically, right? You can have working class culture and be rich and vice versa. So like rappers in the United States, they're very rich, but they're from the project, so the culture they have is of the lower class, right? So, and to me, I'll just lay out my thesis. If I were to write a book, and I've been saying this for a long time, to me, this is about, at least in this country, and I bet it's true in Europe, but I defer to you, of course, on this. It's been largely a civil war between those who are of college, who went to college and speak the language of humanities departments, right?
Right.
And those who are not of that world and that culture. Higher education in this country, I think, has defined the culture of the dominant liberal class. And to me, when I look at MAGA, the Trump movement, Bannon's War Room, these are people who may have gone to those places, but they did not internalize the culture of them. And I think most of them simply didn't go to those places. How about that? And to me, that's it. So they might be like business owners who have $1 million in the bank, but they never went to Harvard or Yale, and they don't hang out with people who went to Harvard or Yale, and they don't read the New York Times or the New Yorker or the Financial Times. And so in terms of class, economically, they're totally bourgeois and even maybe upper class, but culturally, they're very, very working class. Could that be what's underneath this?
I think, yes, I absolutely think so. So the correlations all work with what you're talking about. I mean, anyone who's visited a museum, in these surveys is heavily voting for Remain rather than Brexit.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. Of course. I love that. I didn't know that. Museum goers are anti-Brexit.
And makes sense. I'm sure if you kind of polled anyone in the Museum of Metropolitan Art, or So there's definitely a status type, element, and university is key to that. So there's no question that in all these countries, Britain is the same. The biggest divide is graduate, non-graduate, the biggest social divide. But the point that I still like to make is, look at the Trump vote. 50% of college-educated whites, I believe, in the last election, I could have that number slightly off, voted for Trump. So it's
okay.
Even though you're right, the non-college group was far more likely to vote Trump than the college-educated. And I'm sure if we were to take the Ivy League,
yes, which colleges, right? That's the question.
Yeah, so I had a look at that there was a big survey of 20,000 students, and I'm trying to remember the share. So in the Ivy League, the Trump vote in the Ivy League was, I think it's like around 10% versus 20% of Trump voters or supporters. It was like 10% in the Ivies and maybe 20 or 25 amongst the student body across the country. So I mean, it's considerably lower in the Ivy Leagues. That's definitely true. So I think there's definitely a status element to this, but I guess I'm more of a believer in a much more powerful thing would be, regardless of, whether you went to the Ivy Leagues or not. I mean, within the Ivy Leagues, who are these people that are Trump supporters? It's an interest. Now, it's a small group, but essentially, if you were to dig in there, you'd find their views on something like the death penalty, their views on discipline in child rearing, their views on a lot of these things are what are known as, they're psychological. That is that, and this is 50% heritable. That do you prefer order? Do you see immigration and diversity as disorderly.
Okay.
A bit like a messy desk, which, by the way, if your desk is messy, you're more likely to be liberal on immigration. But so all
Really?
of these things are connected to a certain psychological disposition. And then there's, and this is sort of the literature on what they call right-wing authoritarianism, which is, I think, a bit of an ungracious way to put it, but people who prefer order to disorder, that's one element. And the other one is this wanting the present to be like the past, which is known as status quo conservatism, which is, again, another kind of psychological disposition. So these psychological dispositions are certainly more common in the working class, but they are also there in highly educated people, which is the kind of person who would be a Trump. So for example, who are these 50% college educated whites voting Trump? Would be probably people with that psychological profile. So I think the psychology, I think, matters more than education and class, but the class also matters.
Yeah.